Hi everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week's first question comes to me from Beswick1306, who asks, "Hey Steve, as a child, I used to love the superheroes, but as I've gotten older, and now I appreciate thought and intelligence, I gotta say, I have a certain fondness for the bad guys, who have to use nothing but their wit to defeat the hero who is usually faster and stronger than they are in every way. Any thoughts?" Boy, that is a great observation. Now that I think about it, most of the matches between superheroes and archvillains are kind of mismatches, aren't they? At least when it comes to physical stuff. And when I'm thinking of like the big superheroes like Batman and Superman, my favorite guys. I mean, most of their villains aren't really matches for them physically, are they? And yet they continue to provide great challenges for them. I think one of the things that's so appealing about that is that it does show that the intellect can be greater than the strength, and it also forces the heroes to use their brains. You know, like I think that's why Lex Luthor is such a great character, and why I would always say that Lex Luthor is the definitive Superman villain. People always bitch and moan about how Lex is always the villain in the movies. But that's just because Lex is just such a much better character than most of the villains in Superman that would be more of a physical match for him. Lex is the perfect adversary for Superman because he has mentally what Superman has physically, and that's an interesting clash. And he's someone that Superman can't defeat just by flying in and zapping with his heat vision or beating up, and that's what makes Lex so appealing. And and mental superpowers or mental strength, I suppose, is something that is more attainable for us than Superman super strength. Nobody is ever as strong as Superman. Nobody can ever do the things that Superman can do in real life. But you can be smart, you can be clever, you can be cunning. These are traits that are achievable, that are attainable. And that's really appealing. KG Blade, "Hey Steve, are you old enough to remember the days when video games were mostly played at arcades? I fondly recall them as child bars, the kind of places where you were allowed to be at as a kid, but there was an undertone of seediness. Then there was the illicit pinball corner at the back where only the true leather-clad bad boys hung out. Were you ever addicted to any classic arcade games? The kind of game where you'd blow your allowance and collect bottles to feed your need?" Oh yes, there were a few games like that. I am old enough to remember when arcades were plentiful, and I used to go to the arcade every day after school. But I waited till I was a little older because I grew up in a very small town, and we had a video store in town where my mom worked for a few years actually, so I would hang out there a lot. And there were video games in the back, but there were only like 2 or 3. It wasn't a proper arcade, it was just like a little game nook. And some of those games I played a lot. There was a wrestling game, which of course I loved, and I would throw quarters away on that thing. And then when I got old enough to drive, I would go to the mall after school, which was about a 15-minute drive from where I lived, and they had an arcade, and that was where I really got into gaming, when I really got into arcade gaming, because then you had your own money, you had your own time, you had your own transportation, and you could play as long as you could afford to play. And during that phase, the game that really grabbed me wasn't a video game. It was actually just the air hockey table. I used to play air hockey all the time and just love it. And I could still play air hockey today. There are a few arcades remaining in my general area. They are very, very scarce now, unfortunately. But there are 2 within 10 or 15 minutes of where I live, and they both have air hockey tables, and I could play air hockey all day. I love air hockey. Radical Bacon asks, "What did you look like when you were a baby/young child? Every time I imagine you as a child, you have the beard." It's fortuitous that you asked that question when you did, because my wife and I were going through some stuff last week, just sort of clearing out the clutter around here, and I found some old pictures that I had gotten from my grandmother, and there are some baby pictures mixed in there. So I will show you a few of them. Here is me at 3 months old. That's me at 3 months old. That's August 1980. Granny has helpfully labeled the picture so I know exactly when everything is. Speaking of Granny, here's a picture of Granny. She doesn't like to be photographed, but she uses me to hide her perfectly attractive face. She just doesn't like to be photographed. And then speaking of my grandparents, here's me with Pap, who died unfortunately about 8 years ago. That's me and Pap. He was like a second father to me. And there he is holding me as a little baby. There are some other ones I have too from a little bit later. Those were 3 months. And these here are from 3 years old. So these are from 1983, February of 1983. There's me and Pap again. He's zipping up my jacket for me. And here's another one of me. This was, yeah, these are all at Pap and Granny's house. There I am. And here's another one taken moments later. As you can see, I was a big pro-gun person when I was 3 years old, which is about right. And then one more. Here I am drinking Coca-Cola. Unlike my gun fetish, I did not grow out of my Coke addiction. It goes way back. It's in my bones, as you can see. So that's what I look like. No beard. That's what I look like as a little kid. First at 3 months and then at 3 years old. So if you were dying to know for whatever reason what I looked like as a baby, now you know. KJ Miley, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Do you watch horror movies? If so, what are a few of your favorites? Not only do I watch horror movies, buddy, I have written and starred in horror movies. So put that in your fucking pipe and smoke it. Yeah, our film company, Neon Reel Entertainment, has done a few like super low budget horror films that I've had a hand in writing and making, and I even been on screen in a few of them. As for movies that people would have actually seen, I really love the old Universals. I love James Whale's work, particularly Bride of Frankenstein and The Invisible Man. I think those are both just about as good as it gets as far as horror movies. And the original Wolfman as well is just a terrific, terrific movie. The classic Hammers I love. I love Christopher Lee as Dracula. I think all of those are great, particularly Horror of Dracula, which was the first one, and then Dracula Prince of Darkness, which was the second time that Christopher Lee played Dracula. And their Frankensteins are great too. They had a whole long series of Frankenstein movies starring Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein. And the original one, Curse of Frankenstein, is great. And the other ones are all pretty good. And then they have another really, really great one closer to the end of that series called And Frankenstein Created Woman, which is just an incredible, incredible movie. Much deeper, much more interested in things like philosophy and the nature of the soul, what have you, than a typical horror movie would be. Just some absolutely great movies. And great directors. Some of my favorite filmmakers are horror directors. I mean, I already mentioned James Whale, and there's also Terence Fisher, who directed a lot of those classic Hammers, who was just brilliant. Just a brilliant filmmaker, a great storyteller, and very economical. So much you could learn from studying the films of Terence Fisher if you are aspiring to be a filmmaker yourself. I would recommend those very, very highly. Atheist Bob. Hi, Steve. What is the best and most convincing argument for theism? In my estimation, the best and most convincing argument for theism is the cosmological argument, the argument from first cause. But having said that, I also must stress that I find the cosmological argument in general to be a terrible and very unconvincing argument. I really don't think, judging things, if you judge the arguments for theism relative to each other, there are definitely some that are better than others, but if you judge them relative to the arguments of science, the arguments of reason, the arguments of secularism, atheism, etc., I don't think there are any good arguments for theism. That's why I'm an atheist. If I thought there were good arguments for theism, I would be a theist. I don't think there are any, so I'm an atheist. Poor Cicero asks, do you know anything about the works of Shakespeare, and what do you think of them? Are they really timeless classics, or just a form of torture for high school English students? Also, do they have any merit of relativity to the modern world? P.S. Shakespeare was a tool. I'm not a Shakespeare scholar by any stretch of the imagination. I just know what I studied of him in college, really. And we studied him in high school, too, but none of that was very deep. I went through a very anti-Shakespeare phase, mostly when I was in high school and was forced to study him. I'm over that now. I no longer think that Shakespeare. I used to think like Shakespeare, like you said, that Shakespeare was a tool. He was a terrible writer. He was the most overrated writer in our language. That just enough with Shakespeare. Stop giving me Shakespeare. And I know I haven't done a complete 180. I don't think that he's the greatest writer ever. But I do recognize that his work has tremendous value and that he was a very important, very influential, and yes, very, very talented writer. I do see shortcomings in him. For instance, there are things about Shakespeare that I really, truly love, like his use of language, his poetry, his turn of phrase. The guy was just a genius. But I don't think he was that great of a storyteller. I think that when you read Shakespeare or when you watch Shakespeare performed, you're watching it for the language. You're watching to see the actors manipulate that language. And the characters as well. Shakespeare came up with some very, very interesting, very splendid characters. But in terms of plot, in terms of story, he wasn't, I don't think he was that great. But I don't necessarily even think you could use that as a legitimate knock on Shakespeare, because I think when you read Shakespeare, when you watch Shakespeare, it's obvious to me that he's far more concerned with character and theme, and particularly language, than he is with plot. It's easy for me to sit here centuries after the man's work has been complete and criticize his shitty plotting. For instance, the example I always use is Macbeth, how Lady Macbeth is this hugely important character in the story, and then she commits suicide off stage, and we hear about it like in the final scene of the play. Like if you've ever read Macbeth or seen Macbeth, literally someone just mentions before the curtain goes down, oh, by the way, Lady Macbeth killed herself. It strikes me as very odd that Shakespeare, it's almost as if he had finished writing the play and then he was like, oh, fuck, I didn't do anything with Lady Macbeth. What happens to her? She kills herself. Yeah, there you go. Just have someone say that. It feels like that. It feels just kind of rushed and kind of tacked on because he all of a sudden remembered that he needed a resolution for this very important character. But again, I think things like that can allow me to say that I don't think he's the greatest writer ever. But in a sense, it's not fair because I don't think he cared about things like that. I think he wrote for the language, he wrote for the characters, and he wrote for the themes. And the plot was just sort of there, wherever he needed it to be. So no, I don't think he was a tool. I think he was a very important writer and a very good writer. I will say that I don't think the way he is taught in high school is very good. I think there are better ways to teach Shakespeare than the way I was taught in high school. And one of the ways I think would be good to teach it would be to emphasize watching performance more than reading it. I think when you go to college and you're an English major like I was, reading Shakespeare is not that bad. Reading Shakespeare is actually very enjoyable. For me anyway, because that's where my interest was. I was an English student. I wanted to read things. I wanted to discover new writers and understand what they were doing. The reading was fine to me. It was what I was there for. But when I was in high school, and many of my fellow students who were in high school who had no particular interest in English, I think it would be much better to watch Shakespeare being performed than to force them to read it. Either watch it in the form of a film adaptation or maybe even find a place locally where a Shakespeare play is being performed and go watch it and then study it from there. I think that would be a much better way than forcing 15 and 16 and 17-year-olds to read Shakespeare. Next question. Cardinal Dolan has been quoted recently that the church needs to be more welcoming of gays and that God does in fact love gays. Do you feel the church is in fact trying to be more accepting because they feel it's the right thing to do, or are they just trying to get more seats filled? Thanks for your time, your pal Rob. And that is Rob, my colleague at Neon Real Entertainment. He actually originally wrote the script for The Darkness and Tom Marcos, the film that we made last year that I came aboard and and sort of wrote after him and did a rewrite on it. But it was originally his story, and he is just a great guy and a great writer. And thanks for asking a question, Rob, and a good dude, a really good friend. I hope that the reason the church is trying to be more inclusive of gay people is out of genuine concern and love and wanting to reform their attitude and not just to fill the pews. But if they really loved gay people, and if they really wanted gay people to feel at home in the church, they would drop their opposition to same-sex marriage. They would drop their opposition to same-sex couples adopting children. They would stop doing any number of anti-gay things that they do, because that's talking out of both sides of your mouth. I mean, and Christians do this, unfortunately, a lot. They seem to have convinced themselves that they can get away with the most awful offenses against gay people, the most horrible displays of discrimination and bigotry, as long as they preface it with, "But we love you." Well, love needs to be demonstrated. Respect needs to be demonstrated. You can't say you respect someone and then act in a way that demonstrates you have no respect for them. So if the Catholic Church really wants to convince gay people that they are welcome and they are loved and they are respected, they need to start treating them with love and respect and not just telling them, "Oh, we love you," or "God loves you." They need to prove that. And, I mean, I'm not a Catholic, I'm not even a Christian, but I hope they do, because I think that would be better for everybody. But I don't look for it to happen, unfortunately. I don't think, I mean, I think the church will come around for gay people the same way it came around for black people, when everybody else has already come around. Deadbolt, hey, Steve, when are we going to see more Steve and Stuffy? Are the cast trying to renegotiate their contracts or something? Tell them to knock it off and get their fuzzy prima donna asses in gear, because I want to see more of that. You should do weekly episodes, even if they aren't that long. That would be awesome. Well, that would be awesome. Thank you very much for saying that. The Stuffy videos are really my favorites that I do. I love doing those videos with Stuffy and Toby Benson. I love those characters. I love the version of me that is in them, the complete idiot. I love writing them. I love doing them. And I love that people are watching them and enjoying them. The reason I haven't done any lately is because I'm doing the book review series. An atheist reads I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. When I get that series done, I'm going to take a short break between that one and the next one, and I'll do some Stuffy videos then. And then when I get the next one done, I'm gonna do the same thing I did last year, where I'll finish the one I'm doing now. I'll take a short break, then come back and do another one, which will make 3 this year, and then I'll just say I'm done for the rest of the year. And then that extra slot in my production schedule will be filled with Stuffy videos. I would like to make a lot more of those, because they're one of my favorite things that I do. I love to make those stuffed animal videos. Drew N. WrestleMania is next week. Are you going to watch it? Yeah, actually WrestleMania is this weekend now, and I go back and forth. I would like to watch it, but I go back and forth as to whether or not I'm going to order it or I'm going to try to go somewhere and see it. I am going to see it eventually. I do definitely want to see the show. I'm just not sold on whether or not I want to see it bad enough live to go out somewhere to see it, or to drop $55 to see it here. So I haven't quite decided yet, but I'm definitely going to watch the show. And since this is going up on the edge of WrestleMania weekend, I want to do something a little fun and give you my WrestleMania picks. And for those of you who watch me who are not wrestling fans and couldn't possibly give less of a fuck about this, I apologize. It'll only take a minute. And for those of you who are wrestling fans and might be interested, I'm going to give my picks for who's going to win each match. And then next week we'll come back in the next edition of You Had to Ask, and I will see how well I did. Last year I did this, and I did pretty good. I think I only missed 2. So let's see how well I do this year. We'll try. It's when you pick wrestling winners, of course, it's not like a sport. Wrestling is a worked sport, so you're more just trying to predict the booking. And some of them I'm pretty confident about. Some of them I think could go either way. So here we go. I have a list here of all the matches that have been announced. These are not in any particular order. I don't know what order the matches will go on. The first one is the Intercontinental title match, Wade Barrett defending against The Miz, which I think they have moved to the pre-show. This is a tough one. I think I'm going to take Barrett. for this one. I really don't see what's going to happen with either guy. I mean, if Miz wins the Intercontinental title, I don't really see the point. But then again, if Barrett keeps the Intercontinental title, I also don't see the point. I'm just going to call Barrett. I'm going to say the heel wins and Barrett keeps the title. Next, there's a mixed 8-man tag, the Tons of Funk tag team of Brodus Clay and Tensai, a.k.a. Sweet Tea, and Brodus's valets, the Funkadactyls, Cameron and Naomi, versus Team Rhodes Scholars, Cody Rhodes and Damian Sandow. Two of the best wrestlers on the show, by the way, and really, at least they're on WrestleMania. I don't know, but you couldn't find anything better to do for Cody Rhodes and Damian Sandow than stick him in this 8-man tag. And they're being joined by the Bella Twins. I think the Faces are going to win this one. Tons of Funk and the Funkadactyls will win. It's not going to matter for shit. It might be an entertaining 5-minute match to put on in between something. So yeah, Tons of Funk and the Funkadactyls for that one is my pick. Next, I've got the 6-man tag of Sheamus, Randy Orton, and Big Show versus the team of The Shield, Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns. I'm going to take The Shield on that one, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of a turn on the babyface team. Either Big Show turning heel again, or maybe even Randy Orton turning heel. But The Shield, I think, are going to win that match. Next, Ryback versus Mark Henry. I think Ryback's winning that one. I'm just going with the babyface. I think Ryback is the guy that they're trying to position as a top guy, possibly as an adversary for John Cena a little bit later on down the road. So I think Ryback wins over Mark Henry. Next is the tag title match. Team Hell No, Kane and Daniel Bryan versus the Dolph Ziggler and Big E Langston. And Kane and Bryan are the tag champs. I think Ziggler and Big E win the tag titles. So I'm taking them for that one. Next, Brock Lesnar versus Triple H. No holds barred. If Triple H loses, he has to retire. I'm taking Triple H on that one because this is basically the exact same program that they ran over the summer leading up to their SummerSlam match. Brock won that match. The only reason Brock won that match was to set up this match at WrestleMania where Triple H comes back and gets his revenge. So that's what I think is going to happen. Triple H is going to beat Brock Lesnar. And it will be probably the most unrealistic outcome on the show. It will be, if people didn't know wrestling was fake already, they will know it after that match, because in a real legit fight between Brock Lesnar and Triple H, Brock would win in about 10 seconds, and 5 of those seconds would be Brock thinking about how he wants to beat him. Next, Chris Jericho versus Fandango. I think Fandango is going to win because there's no other reason to have the match. He's been built up and built up and built up, and this is his debut, and he's debuting against a guy like Jericho, who is a legendary wrestler and a great worker, and is known for wanting to put over new talent. So I think that's the only reason we're seeing this match, is because Chris Jericho is going to put over Fandango and make him into a star. Then we have The Undertaker versus CM Punk. Undertaker is going to win. That's the beginning and the end of it. I don't foresee any other possible outcome. Taker is going to win because Taker wins at WrestleMania. Next is the World Heavyweight title match, Alberto Del Rio versus Jack Swagger. And again, there's no way that this match is going to be this high on the card. This is just the order I put them in to make my picks. This might actually wind up being the opening match. They've done that a few years in a row, have the world title match go on first. I think Del Rio is going to win and going to retain versus Swagger. And I will make an additional prediction and count this as a prediction. If this doesn't happen, I got this one wrong. I think Del Rio wins versus Swagger, and then I think Dolph Ziggler comes out and cashes in his Money in the Bank case and wins the world title. So I think Dolph Ziggler is winning 2 titles at WrestleMania this year. He's winning the tag titles in his scheduled match, and I think he's also cashing in Money in the Bank on the winner of Del Rio versus Swagger and winning the world title. And then further than that, I also predict that with both titles, he will continue to lose clean on TV every week. And finally, the big main event, the rematch from last year, The Rock versus John Cena. Rock has the WWE Championship, which is on the line. Cena's winning that one. Again, it's the same Triple H versus Brock thing. Rock beat Cena last year. Cena's coming back. He's going to beat Rock this year, and I would not be surprised if the live crowd on hand at MetLife Stadium is very, very, very unhappy with that. But I think that's what's going to happen. I think Cena's going to beat him, and then I think Rock's going to shake his hand and hand him the belt, and that's going to be that. So, those are my picks. I'll come back next week, and you had to ask and see if I got any of those right, or how many of them I got right. But we're not quite done yet. I still have a shout-out to do before I let you go. The shout-out this week goes to Purple Fox, and Purple Fox has some of the most amazing videos that you will ever see on YouTube. I watched some of his stuff yesterday, and specifically the deconversion series, and specifically the last video in his deconversion series, the 6th deconversion video on Purple Fox's YouTube channel, is one of the most beautifully written and performed and produced YouTube videos I've ever seen. It's just a splendid piece of work about his journey from Christianity to atheism. It is absolutely beautiful. And if you haven't seen it, you should go to Purple Fox's YouTube channel and watch all of his stuff, but particularly that video. It's about 25 minutes long, but it is so worth it. It is so well done. He's a really good writer, and it's just, I can't say enough good things about it. It's an outstanding piece of work, and I'm envious. I'm envious because it's so beautiful and so well done. So that's the shout out, Purple Fox. Check that out. I will be back next week to do this again. If you have a question for me, leave a comment on this video with your question, and I will try to answer it next week. And next week I will also review my WrestleMania picks and see how many I got right. So that's it for this week. See you next week on the next episode of You Had to Ask. Thank you guys so much, as always, for watching.